Hey everyone, welcome to the Genzio Podcast. Super excited to be here at the D3 event in Korea. Very excited to be speaking with my next guest. If you want to introduce yourself, your name, the company you're with, and the position that you have at the company.
Hi guys, my name is Michael Ho. I'm a co-founder and chief business officer at D3. We're also launching the Doma Protocol, which is the world's first blockchain for domain names.
So let's just dive into what we're doing here. We're having this really cool event. I love the cafe name.
Thank you.
Fiat Cafe, a little ironic, but I love it. What made you guys decide to come to Korea Blockchain and host this event?
Yeah, well, domains have been a global asset class for over 30 years. Specifically within crypto and Web3, the Asian market is a very retail-centric market. Naturally, what we're doing involves enabling more liquidity, more price discovery, more users that we want to own domains on chain. And so Asia is a very natural rollout. Korea is a huge market for crypto as well. So it's a huge area of focus for us.
So everyone, I think, knows what a domain is, very widely known.
Yeah.
What is the benefit of putting a domain on chain?
There's a few different things. The first thing I will say is that domains remain the most widely trusted public key on the internet, right? It's the most human readable identifier that everyone trusts. We use it every day. Some people don't even know about it, but trillions of queries on the DNS. And so that has given this asset class fundamental value for over 10, 20, 30 years. I would say in the traditional context, most people think about domain names as just websites, but they can actually be a lot more, right? You can actually use domains as authentication and proof of identity. And so that has given that underlying value. And our goal is to be able to decompose that and allow you to create more financial markets around that universal utility.
And where are you seeing the most growth in this right now?
Well, I think there's a few different opportunities. Number one of the reasons why we started D3 was to also help educate a lot of the Web3 community with the upcoming ICANN application round, which is actually next year. We're an exclusive partner to many of the Layer 1 foundations to help them create new namespaces that actually work on the DNS and actually can be tokenized within the next 12 to 24 months. So we're super excited about that construct. Number two, there's actually a lot of pain points that we're solving today, which is buying and selling traditional domain names like .coms, .xyzs, which is what one of our co-founders launched in 2012, and .ai and many, many more. Many of these domain names trade every day in millions of dollars of volume, right? But still very stuck in the painful process of using manual brokers, email-to-email negotiation for weeks or months. After that's finished, you also have to use a third-party escrow provider to prove proof of funds, and then you have to enter manual transfer codes that can take anywhere from weeks to months. So in some cases, for $1 million domain transactions, it's actually harder to buy and sell than buying and selling a house on Redfin or
That's crazy.
What Open Door is aspiring to do today.
When you talk about the tokenization of domains, like what does that mean? Because I had a conversation with Inder before, and he talked about how basically it could allow many people to co-own like a domain, like almost like a stock. I don't know if you want to, that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. So what does it mean to tokenize a domain? In the context of Doma Protocol, it means our ability to deeply embed with registrars to prove that you actually have the ownership of that domain. It allows us to issue token on chain that becomes authoritative and tied to the actual ownership of that off-chain asset. So remember, domains are natively a digital asset, but it's not on chain. So what we've built is basically a system of rails that integrate into the existing flow of how domains are transacted on the internet and allow us to deeply embed smart contract technology to make these processes faster, better, and more efficient.
Very cool. And what are some of the latest updates from you guys? I saw you guys had some news coming out lately. Can you talk a little bit about what that was about?
Yeah, we've started to announce and roll out a lot of registrar integration partnerships. So part of the protocol's success relies on deep partnerships and collaboration with registrars that actually have access to, number one, premium supply on the internet, like .com domain names, and number two, the actual users behind them. Right? And as a reminder, or a fun fact, if you didn't already know, roughly half the domains on the internet are actually not really used or hosted as, on a website, right? Hosting a website, which tells us that people like to just invest in these, right? They have domain portfolios, they park their domains, just put ads on it. There's like a buy me now sign, right? So a lot of these domains have the urge to be transacted, but just lack the discoverability. So that's kind of the mission that we're solving first and foremost, is enabling deeper liquidity and more discoverability through tokenization of those efforts. So the registrar integrations are very important. What we're also doing is developing a native set of apps and interfaces that allow a domain owner that can be Web2 or Web3 to bring their domain on chain and actually interact with it in a financial capability that gives them more value add. So tokenization is not really the value creation. It's just a means to an end. It's a distribution vehicle. But what's really important is the apps and the activity that you can do with that tokenized asset afterwards. Yesterday, we actually just announced our liquid domains launchpad called Mizu. It's the world's first platform that actually allows you to fractionalize ownership and usage rights of a domain end to end. And that's really important for us because we're very focused on solving the near-term problem of unlocking this premium supply on chain. So for the first time ever, you as a retail user can actually buy into a premium.com or premium.ai name that you may want to assemble as part of your investment portfolio, whether it's Web2 or Web3.
Can you talk about some of the partners that you're working with?
Yeah, so there's a few different partners. We do have a few channel partners as well. Solana Foundation is a big partner of ours. Avalanche is a big partner of ours.
Are we going to get a Solana?
Yes. So we are partnered with Solana to launch .sol and .solana in the upcoming ICANN round. So we're very excited about that. Solana has one of the most enthusiastic, passionate communities that do everything on chain, trade, meme coin, speculation. Right? I'm sure you guys follow the news. So for us to be able to create a branded namespace for their community is a huge privilege and something we're very, very interested in, looking forward to doing.
Why do you think this kind of explosion is happening now? Like, why are we seeing this, I guess you're saying speculation of domains, people being able to buy and sell them. Why hasn't this happened before, in other words? Because it seems like a really good idea.
Yeah, I think in the last 12 to 24 months, obviously the administration change has created a more open and risk-on market. But in general, I think we have been waiting for a lot of the legal antics and politics to kind of de-risk alternative assets coming on chain, I would say. So the Genius Bill was a huge step forward, especially in the States, for number one, enabling stablecoin on-ramps, right? And once you have the onboarding of like kind of this currency, you have all these alternative assets that are denominated in these currencies that can actually also be tokenized on chain now. So I think we've had this huge surgence of stablecoin, T-bill tokenization, but there's also this really promising alternative asset category, right? Real estate, equities, digital assets like domains, that have been waiting and primed and waiting, right? And so our belief is that domains, as one of the first digital native assets, or the first digital native asset on the internet, should be one of the first assets that are naturally tokenized, right? And tokenization unlocks greater utility, greater liquidity as well.
When you talk about liquidity, because I think it's like so fascinating, it's like liquidity for domains. Like, what does that really mean? Is it like basically just more, I guess, liquidity on a certain domain, or how does that kind of work?
It can mean many things, but in general, what we're trying to do is increase the net buyers in the ecosystem and also the amount of capital, right? For many, many years, it's been the same buyers and sellers, right? Of people, institutional holders, bulk domain owners, speculating amongst each other. But we really do think this asset class has true value. And especially with tokenization, we create new, interesting ways for people to utilize the domain beyond just ownership or hosting of a website, right? So that does increase the net asset value, if you will. And that also means more people deserve to own these assets and can own these assets, right? Many of the premium.coms that were acquired back in the .com, boom, have not really been utilized, right? It's just a lot of domain investors, right? So I think this kind of unlock does trigger a new generation of domain ownership on chain. Same time, you also go from one-to-one ownership to one-to-many, right? Through like fractionalization as one example, and many, many more new things coming. So I think you'll see that people will start to use domains in many different ways, right? As a store of value, as a store of utility, as proof of identity, right? And all of these can be financialized, right? And there's a value attributed to that. So it's our goal to kind of bridge that gap, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think it's fascinating, honestly. One of the coolest projects right now.
Yes.
What is Doma Protocol and how does it work with D3?
Yeah, Doma is the world's first protocol that actually tokenizes real domains and registrars on chain.
Okay.
D3 is contributing to the development of this protocol, but the protocol long-term serves all these stakeholders on their DNS today, right? Any registrar, any registry can work with the protocol to bring their assets and their users on chain. And I think it's a really great Web 2 to Web 3 story. And it's one that we've tried to paint for as long as we've started the company. Is like, we think, the industry does need a lot of these Web 2.5 use cases to enable true mass adoption of any asset class, really.
I think it's so cool. I mean, the amount of people that are going to be tokenizing their domains once this is fully active is going to be insane. And I think there's going to be a lot of speculation.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like crazy in a good way.
we saw it in the first iteration with ENS, right? Our friends at ENS, they've done a really great job of building a passionate community. And it's called ENS domains, right? So they, all of this is predicated off the prior trends that happened in the domain industry for the last 20 years. So we're excited to bridge that gap.
What is it? Its own blockchain? Are you building on another blockchain?
A layer 2. It's a layer 2 EVM using OP Stack.
Okay.
What we wanted to do was not recreate the system. Our goal is to integrate first and then enhance. So we decided to build on top of Ethereum because we like the security and scalability of that. And so what actually happens is that we've designed certain compliance modules. Not all compliance, but certain custom modules that allow us to decompose ownership and usage rights of a domain, which now unlocks a lot of different things, right? You can now bring lease to own on chain. You can have fractionalization, as I mentioned, right? Beyond simple tokenization and buying and selling, there's just a lot more things you can do, right? You can now programmatically issue a subdomain and put a value on that and make that enforceable, right? I can now map various wallets to my domain and my text record. I can, this is all obviously longer roadmap, but now we can integrate with online agents, decentralized agents, right? You can give them a subdomain within your domain that you own. You can programmatically issue, and you can, importantly, you can enable third-party app developers for the first time that aren't ICANN accredited to actually distribute domain names, right, through the Doma Protocol and some of the registrars on chain. Typically, if you want to be able to sell a domain name or facilitate a transfer, you have to have some level of embeddedness in the ICANN system, which requires some level of accreditation, KYC, right? Because the goal of the internet is open, secure, and safe, right? So for anyone to have the keys to control some sort of distribution, typically requires some sort of accreditation.
And for our viewers who aren't familiar with ICANN, what is ICANN?
ICANN stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. They are the world's multi-stakeholder nonprofit organization. We internally like to say they're actually one of the first DAOs that were formed because it's not controlled by any one government or state. It's literally multinational. The analogy I'll use internally is that it's the United Nations of the DNS, right? They control the policies of how all IP addresses are managed. They delegate the rights to operate new and existing namespaces. So they do a lot of policies, and they're very focused on securing the accessibility and openness of the internet.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. They run the internet in some ways.
Yes. Yes.
Not really, but
no, I would say they're more of a watchdog. They set policies. They really want to make sure the stakeholders on the infrastructure level, like registries like D3 itself, as well as registrars, like GoDaddy, for example, are protecting the users, right, and enforcing some of those rights, right? You can't maliciously use a domain name, for example, to do illegal things, right? So they set all of those policies, and they also set registration policies, right? Like there's like domain transfer restrictions, there's KYC to a level extent of how deeply you want to use your domain on the internet. So they kind of create all those policies, and they actually meet every quarter. And their meetings are free, actually, around the world. So if you're interested in becoming an active voice, you can actually go register for their meeting, and you can go there and sit there and raise your hand. And part of their process is that they'll listen to everyone, right? Which is why a lot of these things on the internet are deliberately, they take time, right? sometimes too much time, but we're hoping that blockchain can help accelerate that if we can become a more trusted or trustless source of value add.
So you mentioned that you'll be able to create your own domains through the protocol, Doma Protocol. Is that correct?
Doma Protocol allows any registrar to facilitate the creation of new domains, right? So if their domain doesn't exist today, pretty soon a third-party DApp, like a DApp, for example, can integrate on-chain and integrate with a registrar and become a distributor or a reseller of that. If that makes sense. Typically, that requires some Web 2 level of integration. You have SDKs, KYC, all the stuff. Our goal is to make that a lot more simple through a lot of the modules that we facilitated through the protocol.
So if I wanted to make like a .zac, could I do that through you guys?
That's the creation of TLD. You would have to talk to us at the registry level. I'm talking about domain creation, like Zac dot whatever. For an app developer to be able to facilitate that typically requires a level of Web 2 integration. However, with the protocol, our goal is to make it plug and play where any app developer can ping the contract or ping the protocol, a certain part of the module, allow that level of distribution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So Zac.com, which is I'm sure is already taken. Yes. If I wanted that, I could, and it hadn't been created for some reason, I could go on and create that.
Yes, exactly. Through our own registrar or another registrar that's integrated. Yes.
Very cool. Are you guys launching a token?
We're mainly focused on the launch of the platform, so we call it DomainFi right now. We just announced Mizu yesterday, so all eyes are on that first. And I think our goal is to prove a true revenue model on chain before thinking about future roadmap. But we do have a very exciting community. They're very, very much looking forward to the launch of Doma. So we take a lot of these things into account, but because of our Web 2 to Web 3 stakeholders as well, it's very important for us to have a real product in the market before anything else.
No, I appreciate that. And I was just laughing because getting revenue for a lot of Web 3 companies is not the first thing they think of.
Yeah.
Even though it really should be.
Yeah, I mean,
sustainable.
My co-founder and the CEO, Fred, if you ever get a chance to speak with him, we're a revenue first company, that's for sure. So we focus on solving real pain points. And usually when that happens, there's a price that you can charge for that. So we're very focused on improving out the business model for this.
Are you guys a first mover in this space, or is there other competition?
There have been other efforts. I would say they're peers at this point, but I would say we're really the first protocol in general that's able to deeply onboard Web 2 to Web 3. I think there's certain peers in certain elements of the space, like people trying to create domain marketplaces, people trying to create separate fractionalization platforms, but no one has really done this end-to-end like we have, which involves on one end integrating where the domain is custodied today at the registrar, bring that all the way on chain, and then also facilitating a standard primitive for people to fractionalize, right? So there's certain elements of this because domains are renewed every year. There's certain KYC restrictions. There's the constitution threshold. So a lot of these things are custom built on our protocol.
Who's the target user?
There's a few target users. The initial target users is that we want Web3 users to become more exposed to this very, very amazing asset class, right? Long term, we do want to use this as a proof point to trigger the onboarding of more and more premium assets, right? As Inder may have mentioned previously, there's just under 400 million domain names on the internet, right? So that's a lot of supply to onboard, but it does, and most of that supply is really not going to move until they see some proof points, right? So our goal is to create some case studies first with what we're doing on chain with some of the most premium assets, and hopefully that triggers a self-serving, platform and creates a flywheel effect that allows people to really tokenize and onboard more and more of their portfolio.
Do you think there's going to be some speculation here where people might buy into a domain just based off the name versus what's actually on it? And I guess that probably already happens.
That happens today.
Yeah.
I would point to ENS, as a great example. People just love buying and speculating on vanity identity, right? Even the concept of owning a Twitter handle, right? It's worth something, right? Because it's your identity on the internet, right? So there is actually a value to that. And it's easy to trivialize, but it's actually very important, right? Because as the more and more online we become, the more we're transacting and representing ourselves on chain. So it's very important to have kind of a handle that you can call your own, right?
What do you see the value in these kind of in-person events?
Well, what we're building, DomainFi, requires a lot of education, right?
Yes.
Most people don't think about domains, even though they use it every day. They don't think about the fundamental value. So we have to be out here, boots on the ground, showing people the value of this asset, right? We can't just assume that they'll discover it. And so it's very important for us to have these sessions with the retail community, importantly, so that we understand what their desires are, right? Especially in Web3, there's a lot of different products launching every day. So it's very important for us to have and be in tune with, style and substance of what we think the community wants.
Yeah, you mentioned, this is a global thing. Where are most domains owned? Like geographically, is there like a certain countries that have a lot higher domain ownership as a percentage?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
No, it's a great question. I would say domains, number one, are global. But I would say domain investing is very popular in the US. It's very popular in Asia, particularly China, and Japan, and Europe as well, right? The interesting thing is that there's different compliance for the apps that facilitate that level of distribution in the region, right? In Europe, they're very focused on privacy and, compliance and regulation, right? And so, that region particularly has its own set of challenges for these people trying to build and scale distribution there. Same set of challenges, with the US and China, right? Very different, geographical considerations. And so our hope is actually blockchain consolidates and standardizes that approach, right? Because we're not tied to any government or sector, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And do you expect like some kind of pushback from certain countries when you're like tokenizing domains, or is it just kind of like once the genie's out of the bottle, or whatever you want to say, it's just kind of it'll be hard to rein in?
It's a good question. So I will remind you that domain names are not governed by any one government or state, right? The registrars may be because they operate business there. However, domain names can be registered or transferred to any registrar, if that makes sense. So actually what we think the blockchain solves is like it removes any conflicts in kind of like the geographical considerations. Now, when you use a domain, it's very different, right? When you're hosting content and you're conducting business on that, you have to comply with the local regulations, right? We're not a workaround for that. But what we are a workaround, or not a workaround, what we're trying to accelerate is how easy it is to transact domains, right? And this concept of domain investing and domain fi. So our hope is to make that simple, fast, efficient, instant finality, all the common things that you like to see with blockchains. I'd like to talk a little bit about our upcoming launch with Mizu.
Tell me about Mizu.
Important.
Yeah.
So we touched a little bit on the aspect of, the supply being onboarded. And what we actually have access to today is the catalog, super, super high premium inventory that the market has never seen because the asset prices are so high.
Like chat.com.
Like chat.com, which one of our investors sold.
I remember.
Actually,
Yeah.
to, Sam Altman, right? And so what we actually have access to is this premium catalog. But for the first time, we're actually working with those owners to tokenize the blockchain because they do believe in the benefit of allowing multiple people to own this and allowing more utility, right? Even the simple concept of owning a subdomain, right? Imagine you can own a subdomain within chat.com, right? Or you're a hockey fan and you can, now own a subdomain within that, right? So there's certain microeconomies that we can create around this that we think fractionalization is the perfect primitive to facilitate it. So the first order of effect is launching a native interface that allows, number one, fractionalization, but also greater price discovery for these assets, right? Typically, if you wanted to buy any of these assets in the last 10 years, you would have to basically do like a bullet loan or take it out, $5 to $10 million. For someone that hasn't been in the industry for that long, that's a huge price to swallow, right? It's like buying a house, basically, right? And if you don't know you want to buy a house, it's going to be really hard, right? So the liquidity issue is there for sure. And I think fractionalization, first time, allows a level of retail interest that never has happened before. So I expect, and what we want to do is accelerate that very closely. So in the next 30 to 60 days, you're going to see a lot of focus on Mizu and the focus to Doma onboarding the most premium assets in the world to kind of create that case study and that example and that precedent that this is a huge asset class, right? It's not just one domain. There's 360 something million domains, right?
Can you talk about some of the domains that we fractionalize that are premium?
Yeah, I mean, well, you have to keep posted on our platform. There's a bunch of marketing that we're doing around that, but these are going to be common dictionary words. They're going to be AI names. They're going to be .com names. These are kind of the hottest extensions that we see today. And then in the next 6 to 12 months, what you'll see is we're going to start to introduce a lot of our Web3 partners who are also launching their own extensions with us. You can purchase in a tokenized variant on Doma.
Is there any that people might be surprised to see on there?
We've announced a few, like we're working with obviously Solana, we're working with Avalanche, right? So if you're a fan and an active user in those communities, it wouldn't be a surprise to you. We're also working with a lot of cultural communities as well, like ApeCoin and a few others that I can't announce yet, but very, very close, right? These communities have been around for many years in the Web3 world, and we're very excited to work with them to create their own extension very, very soon, right? A few examples like Ape also include SHIB, like Shiba Inu, working with that foundation on .SHIB, right? So it kind of depends on the user, but the great thing is like domains can serve anyone, right? And so you kind of see this proliferation of all these different extensions and use cases. This actually happened about 15 years ago in 2012, right? 300 dictionary words were created, like dictionary word extensions, right? .cash, .finance, .property, right? You all have created their own distinct communities that you don't even know about, right? There is, a lot of commercial and economic opportunity in being able to operate those namespaces.
Thank you so much for the fantastic interview. Make sure to follow them and tokenize your domains. I think fractionalization, this is just a couple of my takeaways. Number one, I think the fractionalization is absolutely massive because, if you're very, very passionate about a certain topic, subject, and you believe that that topic or subject is going to continue growing over time, that's definitely something you wanted to invest in. I mean, if you think of like the creator economy, like let's say Mr. Beast has a website or something and he wants to fractionalize it, and you obviously couldn't buy the whole thing, but if you can buy a part of it, you believe in whatever that company, creator, person is doing, and it's going to gain traction over time, it is a really solid investment to make. I think it's really smart. So I think the fractionalization piece is just going to open up the game. And I think we're going to see a lot of ups and downs with that. But I also think that it's going to create real price discovery, which is something that we haven't had, right now. Like, if you go to a GoDaddy or something, they list the price, you can kind of negotiate with them. Talked about it can be months of going back and forth, but you don't really know if that price is what it's worth. But if you have live fractionalization with, price discovery in real time, you can actually get a way better idea of what something is worth in the real time, which I think is fascinating. So I just want to say thank you so much for the great interview. I honestly think that this is like one of the coolest projects.
Thank you.
I love talking with your team.
Yeah.
It's just fascinating. It's really fascinating. So thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Hey, what's up?
But it's not something Genzio is afraid of.
If you want to survive, you got to build a house.
No, we do not understand.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Rebecca's Genzio Media House.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.